Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Welcome to another special bonus episode of Great Women in Compliance, hosted by Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley. I'm Mary Shirley, and if you're new to the podcast, our bonus episodes feature experts in a field who are not necessarily women in compliance, but have skills and knowledge to share and advance and empower women in compliance. Today's bonus episode guest is a great gentleman in compliance who really needs little introduction because he is already known to so many, and that's precisely the expertise that we're going to leverage off in today's episode. I present to you all my very first American friend in compliance and one of my dearest friends, Jay Rosen. Welcome to the podcast, Jay. First off, thanks for joining us. And secondly, thank you for being such a great support to Lisa and myself with the podcast and all of our other endeavors. You have cheered us on from day one and been a fantastic ally. For the approximately 2 people listening who don't already know you, why don't you share your slightly unconventional journey to a career in compliance?
Well, thanks, Mary. I'm really excited to be here and look forward to our conversation. Let me try to give you the bullet points on how I got from a career in Hollywood to being at Affiliated Monitors. I came to Los Angeles in the late 80s. And first I worked at a couple talent agencies, and then I worked at 20th Century Fox, which is now owned by the Walt Disney Company. While I was at Fox, I helped produce 14 movies, including Speed, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Alien 3. And, my thought was that I was going to go through, filmmaking and rise up and to be a producer. And I did that career from the late 80s into about 2000. And the last movie I worked on was something called The Perfect Storm. And after that, I decided that I had done everything I wanted to do entertainment-wise. And some folks from university said to me, didn't you go to the Wharton School and get a real degree? So why don't you get a real job? So I ended up getting involved with some graduates from my college, and they had opened up an investment banking firm called Focal Point Partners. And I was there from 2003 until when the market crashed in 2008. And that was when my twins, Millie and Michaela, were born. And, one thing that happened was when I was at the investment bank, they started to downsize due to the market crash, and they didn't need somebody there to be bringing in healthy deals because everything was bankruptcy transactions. So this is where I start to turn in my career, and I kind of get myself into the path on ethics and compliance. And I started working for the world's largest translation company called TransPerfect. And one of the things that I was doing was selling these things called virtual data rooms, where you can go in online and virtually do a deal and do any type of due diligence. So it's something that's commonplace technology now, but it was really early stage back then. And TransPerfect, besides selling these data rooms, also was a translations company. And I figured to myself, well, I should probably, learn about these translations things, because if it's something I can sell, it's some way to augment my income. So because of learning about the translation products that they had there, I got myself involved with FCPA. And the story as I tell it is I was part of a group that was working with financial companies and law firms, and we all brought different things to the table. And what I brought to the table was translations. And the partner who was in charge of this effort said, we should be using this solution for every FCPA matter. And I nodded my head like I understood what he was talking about, but I had no idea what FCPA was. So I ran home and put it in Google, and it came back, Fairfax County Park Authority. And I said to myself, I really don't think this has anything to do with my in-laws in Fairfax County, Virginia, and their park. So let me look again. And then it came back with the 4 most beautiful words that I've ever heard in my life: Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And so realistically, from coming out to being in the movies and, over like 15 years, I got myself into FCPA. And then what I needed to try to do, since I didn't really know about this, I was really learning on the job. So what I had to do was ask a lot of intelligent questions so I could learn. And then what I ended up becoming helpful in was doing 2 things. One was helping when companies were doing global investigations and they would need to translate documents and translate, anything that had to happen. And the second thing that I really, enjoyed doing was working with global companies who had ethics and compliance policies that they had to translate into 40 plus languages. So I was in the translation field from about 2010 to 2017. And then in 2017, I transitioned over to Joint Affiliated Monitors, which is based in Boston, where you are. And this coming February will be my 4-year anniversary.
That's awesome. I've heard your story a few times now, Jay, in various different forums, and there's always new detail that gets added each time. So that was really interesting for me, even though I, of course, know you, and really grateful that you came into the FCPA space. And then aside from your day job, a project that you and I have been working on together is Compliance Career Connection, where we've collaborated with colleagues in compliance to set up support solutions and introductions for people who have been looking for a job during the pandemic. You were one of the instigators for the project. Why was it important to you that this initiative be started?
I love the fact that you referred to me as an instigator, because that is perfect. That is what I do. Again, this is kind of like a story that came out of nowhere, but in the fall of 2020, our good friends, Lisa Beth Lentini Walker and Dan Ayala, had interviewed me on a podcast that they have for their Mentor Core group. And immediately after the podcast was done, somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn. And this is somebody who's now a friend of mine. He's based in Toronto. And he was going through a little career indecision and was looking to try to get a gig. So he reached out to me, and I immediately accepted, and we had a phone call. And as I was talking to him about what his needs were, my Rolodex started rolling in my brain, thinking, who do I know that does stuff at the World Bank, or who do I know who's in Toronto? And I had introduced those names and made connections, because that's pretty much what I do. It's second nature. And then what really kind of kicked this off was I had reached out to Lisa Beth and Dan, and I said, hey, guys, I just want to share a story with you. And I think that there's something interesting happening here. And it was the fact that, there's this immediacy of a connection because we had done a live podcast. And then I kind of did what I do just of second nature. And I think excitement and enthusiasm led me to be the instigator for Lisa Beth and Dan. And then we kind of put together our merry group of robbers here who are getting together. And we're up to what now? Our 3rd event that we're going to be having in January.
Yeah, fantastic. So wonderful initiative there, Jay. And I think a great example of how conversations that you have can turn into much bigger things. And no matter what your role is, even just being one person, you have the power, if you reach out, use the resources around you, and have like-minded people that also want to help, that there is a lot that can be done with relatively small resource, right? We've put this together with relatively small self-funding in terms of being able to set up platforms for communication and so on. And yet the response, I think, and the participation has been phenomenal and in my mind, at least, almost unanticipated.
Well, I think the one thing they hit on is how we've really just been able to crowdsource this effort, that we've had different people with different skill sets,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all, able to kind of almost share a vision that hasn't been created, but as it's coming together, we've got people like Sarah who, has a platform of CCI, and she's just really great with technology, as with Dan. And, it's, I think, exciting for all of us to be able to make tangible differences in people's lives. And if we've, I think there have actually been some folks who have already gotten new jobs based to what we're doing at CCC. So it's really encouraging. And, the second part that we'll probably talk about throughout this interview is just, how is our life different during the pandemic? And most of us are used to seeing each other at events and catching up and doing networking. And that is something that for most of us, we've given up for almost the past 11 or 12 months. And I remember the last in-person event I went to was the SCCE Southern California Regional Compliance Conference. And that is actually going off on this Friday, January 22nd. So that was the last event I went to in person. And, I think we're all kind of, hungry for the connections. And what's interesting now is, most people who are lucky enough to be employed right now are doing their work from home. And when you're doing work from home, it's very hard to have your boundaries between where's your workspace and where's your home space and where's your family space. And, what's happened because of that is that we know now that people are home. It's not that they're going there and they might go to a walk, they might go and buy some things at the market, but besides the fact that they're home. So I try to take advantage of that in terms of, catching up with people and, whether you just grab 10 or 15 minutes, there's a lot that you can say. And, one of the first things that I ask people is, how are they? Because that is really what is paramount on people's mind. How are we doing? How are we doing from a work perspective? How are we doing from a social perspective? And, that's something that I think the CCC initiative is also feeding, because it gives us a chance to network with our community that we've been losing touch with over the last 11, 12 months.
That's right. And that's the perfect segue for my next question. So, Jay, one of the reasons why I thought you'd make a fantastic interviewee for one of our bonus episodes is that your superpower is being a fantastic connector of people, and you can work a room like no one else. So let's do some knowledge sharing and break down some of the concepts in successful networking and couple them with your best practices and tips in these areas. So first off, what's your advice for someone who doesn't yet have an established network in compliance? And, I'm going to ask you to think a little bit outside your own circumstances. You pointed out that we were very lucky in terms of having a team on CCC, which comes with a lot of fantastic skills. And we're very fortunate, or perhaps maybe should phrase that more accurately and say we've worked hard at establishing our networks over the last several years and tried to be good friends and connections to other people, which hopefully is why it became easy and quick to set up CCC with a diverse range of skills. But not everyone's like that, or everyone's got to start somewhere. So what's your advice for someone who doesn't yet have an established network in compliance, and how should they go about getting started? And let's assume also that they're a little shy about doing so.
Just like me, right?
Exactly. Wallflower type.
So let me try to put on that hat, because believe it or not, there was a time when I was shy. And, specifically when I came out here to get involved in the film industry, besides being a fan and, having studied something about filmmaking in university, what my currency was when I was working whether I was working at the talent agencies or movie studios, it's all about interpersonal connections. So when I was working on The Perfect Storm, it was a lot of folks who would come to the set. And since I was working with the executive producer, I would give them tours around the set, or I would, it's basically like being a goodwill ambassador. And when I left the film industry and started getting into investment banking and then with translations, these were all people who were selling solutions, but they were more technical in nature. Whereas when I was involved in the film studio, my currency was my interpersonal skills. So I had to kind of re-engineer myself and take it one step at a time. So the first thing I would try to do with engaging with people is if I was going to a conference, I would take a look at who were the speakers that were going to be speaking. And then I would say, well, what do I have common with these people? Did they go to university where I went to school? Are they from Boston? Do they like the Red Sox? Do they have twins? So I tried to find what were the things about me that could distinguish myself, that could make me someone interesting. And then again, how could I connect with these people by being respectful and asking a lot of questions? And, some people say, oh, well, Jay's a really great conversationalist. And, my secret to holding up my end of the conversation is to be engaged with somebody and ask them questions. And people love to talk about themselves. It's usually their favorite subject. So you just got to get some people rolling. And once they get rolling, then you've got it made. So by taking that first step of trying to figure out what do we have alike? What do we have that is contemporaneous that we can discuss? And then the next thing I would start to do is, you build your posse when you go to different conferences and you build your connections. And so then I would not only look at thought leaders, but I'd try to look at people who, are attending the conference. And you got to get really good at reading badges very quickly. And, a lot of times it was the first time that I would see people in person, but it's not that I didn't know who they were. We would connect on social media and do things like that. So, another thing I would do is if I didn't get a chance to have a conversation with somebody who was a speaker, I would reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, I really enjoyed what you had to say at X, Y, and Z conference. This is who I am and this is what I do. We share Mary Shirley, Lisa Fine, and Dan Ayala as common connections, and I'd like to connect with you. So by taking that approach, I probably get LinkedIn acceptances 6 to 7 times out of 10 tries. So the important thing is once you build that network, you can't be a collector of baseball cards. You can't just let that sit on the side untended, but you need to follow up immediately. So after you make that connection on LinkedIn, then the next thing you would do is within the day or so, reach out and say, thank you so much for connecting with me. What I usually like to do with folks that I connect with on LinkedIn, I love to have a 10 to 15 minute intro call just so we can speak to learn more about what you're doing and see how I can be of assistance to you. So that's, finding the people at the conference, connecting with them on LinkedIn, then having a conversation. And then hopefully that conversation leads to you becoming compliance buddies or leads to you having some common things to discuss. And then if I would read an article that had something to do with their business, or if there was something interesting that I remembered that one of their kids liked to play the oboe or something, whatever I could do to keep myself top of mind and to build it from being more of people who didn't know each other to people who were colleagues. So that's kind of like my way, that by, reading things, but by also kind of seeing other folks in similar ways to watch that. That's how I learned how to network. But I think sometimes networking gets a bad name, and sometimes because it's people who do it in a very mercenary fashion and they don't allow it to kind of breathe and develop and, come into its own. But I think those are the things that I've learned about over the years. And like you said, now with the folks that we are in touch with in CCC, a lot of those people have that same skill set. So we almost can talk in shorthand to each other and know what the other person wants and what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good advice. And I didn't do this deliberately. It was actually only when we started recording that I realized that hypothetical I put to you, that was actually me when you and I met. I didn't have a network. I was very shy. And so all of the tips that you explained there were a great way for helping me connect with someone new. And through you, I would later grow a much bigger network. So I can attest that the advice of Jay is incredibly useful. It works. So you've talked a lot about conferences here and how they can provide an excellent opportunity to meet with people. So when attending an event, what should be the approach for getting the most out of attending like a networking drinks, for example?
Yeah, great question. So I think, unlike some people, I do a lot of prep before I go to a conference. So I prep in terms of taking a look at, who are the speakers, what are the subjects, what kind of things, either lend themselves to be doing complementary what I do, or what kind of things, do I want to have new experiences at? Because I think a lot of times when you go to a conference, it's good to get outside your comfort zone, and it's good to, I don't really do much with internal controls or with Sarbanes-Oxley. So let me go to one of these things, even though it's out of my comfort zone. I don't know who I'm going to meet there, or, maybe I do more in ethics and compliance conferences, but maybe if I do something with the certified fraud examiners, that's going to be of interest to me. So number one is to kind of push that comfort zone. Number two is to do that prep on social media, and, whether these folks have, if you're connected with them on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, kind of take a look at what they're talking about these days, what they're doing, and put that in the back of your mind, because that might, come up in a conversation. And, once you make those connections, what I've been doing to talk about what we talked about earlier in the call is there are certain folks that I have quarterly calls set up with them. So we will have a discussion. There's a buddy of mine from Chicago. We spoke last week. We caught each other up on what we're doing personally and what we're doing professionally. And then for 90 days from there, we put another date, memorialized it in our books, so we knew we would be speaking. So connecting with them, having follow-ups, and then supporting them. So, when my friends and buddies are on different podcasts, like we talked about with Lisa today, or your interview with Christy, I want to know what my universe of folks are up to, and I want to be able to, stay current with them and shoot them a note and say, really enjoyed that article, or, I'd like to do this, or, what we're doing. Tom Fox and I are doing a podcast on X, Y, and Z subject. Is this something that you might be interested in joining us? So I think all that stuff feeds in. And as I said before, it's more important than ever now because of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Some great gems in there, Jay. And I would echo your comment about the comfort zone aspect, but from a different angle, which is, in my mind, it's just good business. If I'm practicing in a certain area of compliance today and I only pay attention to that area, that's not looking out for the Mary of tomorrow who might be wanting to apply for a job where maybe export controls is included. And I don't want to default to, the last time I really worked hard on export controls in my day job was back in 2013. You want to be up with the play, right? You want to be able to talk the talk if you ever need to in the future. So I think keeping an open mind as to all of the various subjects in our periphery, even if they're not part of your current day job, is just good business. And equally, thinking beyond compliance. And I think you pointed out something that Alan Hunt often refers to, which is we have a great network of people in the sort of risk, compliance, data privacy, data security sphere. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't broaden your network further than that and think, well, other people can't help me, so why would I want to talk to them? That's ridiculous. And that's thinking about it on a very transactional basis for networking. And once you're doing that, you're networking for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. When you network for the purpose of genuinely wanting to get to know people, genuinely being of service to other people, I think you're going to be most effective. And that goes back to the mercenary comment you made earlier. You do not want to be mercenary approach to networking. Jay, one of the next questions I had for you, you've actually touched on really well, but I just want to make sure that we leave no nuggets behind. So I was going to ask you, what is your advice for follow-up and continuing the conversation after meeting someone at an event? And I know that you've already mentioned some great tips there on setting up regularized phone calls, keeping the person in mind. If something comes up and you're like, hey, this article is exactly on the topic that we were discussing when we met in person, why don't I just forward this on and share it to them? Or that kid who plays oboe, I will send them, this funny YouTube video to pass on to their kid. Is there anything else that you can think of in terms of follow-up that we've not already discussed?
Well, I just think that to kind of take a long-term view that the relationship never ends. So whether you're at different companies or different jobs or in your past, at one point you were a solution seller and now you're in-house. So if you're that mercenary salesperson, you would say, oh, well, why do I want to talk to so-and-so? Because I used to sell translations, but now I'm selling, independent monitoring. They're not going to have any need for that. So why do I maintain that? And there are still, my old boss in the translations field, I still get in touch with him because when people ask me about translations, I'm like, you got to talk to Jim. So these people are people who you're going to meet in your industry for the rest of your career. And if you become personal friends for the rest of your life. So you have to maintain that connection. And sometimes they're going to be of use for you. Sometimes they won't, but it never changes. And I just don't think that you want to truncate a relationship because it's not paying dividends.
Yeah, great point. We've got some listeners who are consultants or work for vendors. And I know from my own experience working for a vendor, you can worry about whether people think you're just trying to get to know them to push products or otherwise sell things. And as I've been pretty vocal about sitting on the other side of the fence, it can be very off-putting when salespeople are lovely to you until you don't immediately drop $30,000 in their laps when they ask for it. How can staff of vendors and business owners in compliance approach networking to help avoid the concern of networking just to try to hard sell immediately?
All right, I'm going to let you take a breath and just blow it all out because I know this subject matter is vexing to you at times. And I think what I want to try to do is wrap up some things I've said before, but kind of take a look at them in a different light. That whether somebody's going to be a client of yours and they're going to buy something from you at some point, before you ever get to that point and have standing to give the ask, you first need to build that relationship. So relationships can be built in different ways. Sometimes they can be built over milkshakes at Swenson's on Hollywood Boulevard with a guy and his two twin babies who forgot that he was taking care of them on a Sunday, but asked if it'd be appropriate if they could come along on a business trip.
That was our story. That was our meet cute, Jay's and mine. And
so what did you think when I called you and said, so Mary, I'm going to change this up a little bit, but I'm supposed to be taking care of my twins. Do you mind if I bring them to our coffee? What did you think when you heard that?
Well, that was actually quite some time ago now, Jay, but I love children. I don't have any of my own. And so for that to be an added part of a meeting, I thought that was pretty cool. And I've gone on to meet your daughters at occasions thereafter, and that ended up being like a nice little angle for you in terms of continuing the conversation as well, right? For sending pictures of the girls and so on as they were growing up. So while I can't remember my exact thoughts of the moment, I do recall not hesitating to say, absolutely, bring them along. And I always think that a little bit of difference is critical for differentiating ourselves. And I like differentiating myself from everybody else. I don't want to be the same sheep, and I don't mind being the black sheep a lot of the time. So when you're able to differentiate yourself like that, it makes you memorable, right? It makes the event memorable. It makes it different. And, assuming you weren't someone that I would end up becoming friends with later on, I'd always remember you as the sales guy who brought along his babies. So I'm not necessarily suggesting this as a sales technique moving forward, but it certainly didn't harm anything. It made it more interesting, I think, in terms of it being a unique experience. And it's been such a pleasure to watch those babies grow into tweens, and they had their bar mitzvah recently, and just such a pleasure to now be involved in their lives as a bit of an outsider. We live in different areas, but that certainly added a really cool angle to our relationship.
Yeah. So, that was just all spontaneous. It wasn't planned. I wish I could say, this is the deal. I put Millie and Michaela to work. They each get $1 and then they go out and sell with daddy. But so if we talk about, that was how we met, and that was how we began our friendship. It led to some business when I was in the translation world. But, what I want to take a look at now is whether you're selling investment banking, translations, independent monitoring services, they're all slightly different, but they're all very technical. And I think I've shared with you that my family was in the retail shoe business in New England, and I sold shoes ever since I was 12 years old. So selling shoes and selling solutions are much different. But one thing that is central, when I was a 12-year-old kid and a gentleman would come in to buy a pair of Oxfords or wingtips, I could immediately read this guy and realize that he doesn't like shopping. And if he could buy all his shoes in 30 minutes at the shoe store, he would be done for the year. So besides selling him a pair of black and brown and cordovan, I might say, do you need some tennis shoes, or do you need some running sneakers, or can I get you a pair of, slippers so you can wear on a cold winter's night? So this is probably back in the late 70s. This guy, I could sell him $250 worth of shoes, which now would probably be $1,500. And I was not getting commission on the sale. My family owned the shoe store, so this was my job in working in the family business. So I wasn't being motivated by money. But again, I was selling a solution, right? My solution to this guy was, if he got me and I helped him buy his shoes for the year, he wouldn't have to be back here until another year. So when I'm trying to transfer this selling over to selling a solution, I can size up the customer, but what I need to do with them, first of all, is kind of connect with them and gain their trust. And when I was talking about the early stages, when I was selling translation solutions for codes of conduct and I was doing investigations, I was very much in the game, or not the game, but in the part of the relationship where I was learning just along with the people. So I had to learn about how I could save them money, that if they were doing their code of conduct in 40 languages, and if I had a manager who worked under me that every week would call the company and tell them the status of where they were on the different languages and what was being approved, that was something that was a value add that we didn't charge for. But because I took the time to understand the routine about having legal draft the contract or having legal draft the policy in English, and then translating it into the 40 languages, and then getting it approved by different people who were in-country resources, there was a lot of air traffic control there. And I was able to differentiate my company that we didn't do it any differently than any other company would have done it, but I was a lot more sensitive to the issue at hand. And furthermore, I liked it when they would ask me and say, Jay, based on what you've seen in the marketplace, are we better off saying, as a company, we have global zero tolerance for any corruption, or am I better writing that policy regionally? So I do one thing to talk about the UK Bribery Act for the folks in England, and then I do a different thing and I quote the Brazilian Clean Company Act when I'm dealing with Brazil. So I got to a level of sophistication there that I could connect with my potential buyers, that I could become a trusted advisor to them. And then after only getting that position of having some knowledge base of what I'm doing and to be able to talk intelligently, only then at that point do I have the potential to become a solutions provider. But I just can't think of the folks. I mean, either they're drawn to you, Mary, because they want to annoy you, or what, but I can't think of trying to meet somebody and within the first 5 minutes expect that they're going to drop money with me, because that's just not how the currency works, and that's not how the relationship should work. So it troubles me when I hear your horror stories. I feel so bad for you.
Well, the great thing is that the horror stories are really, they're rare, but when they do happen, they are kind of astounding in terms of.
But the last guy, he had an axe to grind, didn't he?
Yeah, I didn't know the last guy. I mean, I was actually planning on doing an episode on that separately, so I won't let you spoil that, Jay.
Okay.
We'll do a little teaser. But yeah, I mean, it tends to be, it's not super egregious for the most part. What I tend to see as someone in-house, and you can let me know if it's the same experience for you as someone in a business development role, what we tend to get quite a lot, that it's not, as I say, it's not egregious, it's super common, where you'll get someone trying to connect with you on, say, LinkedIn, and they'll be trying to sell to you in the introduction message. And so you're like, hang on, just give me 5 seconds here. So based on Jay Rosen's tips for success, that's typically not what you would do if you wanted to cultivate a good relationship with someone. And that type of thing, I would say, that level, or that sort of that lack of self-awareness, I would say that's pretty prevalent, at least in the ethics and compliance space, with a lot of the salespeople out there.
Well, one thing I try to do to kind of head these folks off at the pass is somebody will reach out to me and they're selling appointment setting software, or they're selling some type of scraping information off the internet to call people for sale leads. And I will, when you get that LinkedIn connection, you can either accept it or you can deny it, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes they may have changed how it technically works, but sometimes you can write back first before you accept.
Oh, yeah.
So I would say, dear Stephen, I appreciate you reaching out to me. What I'm doing in this job is X, Y, and Z, and I'm not really sure your solutions are applicable to me. Is there another reason why you could see us, benefiting from a connection on LinkedIn? And that's my kiss off letter, right? Because they never really wanted to talk with me in the first place. They just wanted to tell me something. I voiced my objection, and I gave them an opportunity to come back to say why we should connect. And they're like sharks, right? They're just moving on to the next target. So I don't let anybody come in like that. I just say, look, I'm in sales just like you, and this is, unfortunately, you don't understand my business, or what you're trying to sell me is not very helpful. So in the nicest way possible, I try to give them an opportunity to restate why it would make sense for them to connect with me. And it's too much trouble for them because they never really wanted to connect in the first place.
My worry is that there are a lot of people who happen to have sales roles that genuinely just want to connect. And so I don't want to, be rude to anyone. Not that approach was rude, but you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to just close down a conversation with anyone just because they happen to have a sales role. And I think that's the tricky part.
But I think if they can't articulate the value, then what's the point? So, if they said, Mary, I'm really interested in working in the healthcare space, and I've seen you've done a lot of different things in your career, and especially in your current career, you've worked globally for them. Would you have 15 minutes sometime just to talk to me? And by the way, I read your and Lisa's book, and I loved it. I'm a big fan. Something like that. Somebody's going to be genuine, right?
Well, that's actually how the last guy got in. It was
really?
A pretense of something like that. Yeah. So I think you're right. By and large, that is a pretty good line in the sand to help you understand who's really just genuinely wanting to chat and network. And people should be allowed to go out and try and sell things, right? I think where there is difficulty is where it's masqueraded as something else. So on a pretense, they grab your time, which was the case of the situation that we're referring to, or just overly aggressive and won't take no for an answer. So some will argue with you if you explain that you're not looking for anything right now, and go down a track of, well, clearly you're not doing your job very well if you're not doing XYZ instead. And that kind of thing does come up from time to time. So moving on to some positives now, I'd love to hear your golden rule for networking.
Golden rule for networking. Which number are we on for that?
Number 8.
Number 8. Okay. So I think we've touched upon this already in this conversation. I don't think that there are any specific no-nos, but I think the thing that really I try to be is just to be authentic. And I'll give you an interesting thing that I just did, that I was having a call with somebody who I would consider the co-opetition. So we're in the same space, but we do different things. And there is a client that is a large industrial union client that is going to need to have a monitor. This person who I'm a friend with works for the company who is providing the hotline solution for that company that I'm interested in supplying the monitor to. So I called my friend up and we were having a discussion, and I said, potentially, if you'd ever work for a company that was a union who needed a hotline solution, and you did that, would you be able to make an introduction for a company that was looking to provide ethics and compliance services? So in that roundabout way, I framed it as a parenthetical, and I asked it as a question, but, it was a question that, by us being in the same space, I get asked that question because I understood the guy, and it was going out a little bit on the line, but it also was something that we were both mutually looking to work with the client. So that was something that, based on my relationship, but also based on the knowledge from what I saw out in the marketplace, I had the ability to ask that question and ask it in a non-threatening way, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And I have a golden rule to share, which is that in the heat of the moment, when you identify that two members of your network might make excellent connections for each other, best thing to do before you take any action for introducing them is to get permission from each person first. You never know who might not be in a position at the time for personal reasons to be able to start up a discussion, or for other reasons maybe unavailable or unwilling. So checking before you make an introduction is always good, and that's especially when one person might have significantly more to gain from the introduction than the other.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, there's sometimes you might know somebody who's always going to be open and always be helpful. But, like I had a situation that somebody reached out to me that I had met in 2019, and he was interested in applying for a job. He had indicated that he and somebody who was working at the company both shared me as a connection and wanted to know if I would be happy to reach out and make an introduction. And I said, I said, just so you know, this person and we probably haven't spoken in 6 years, but I have no problems making the introduction. So why don't you put together a little note on what you want to know? I will reach out to the gentleman and see if he's open for an introduction. And less than a day later, the guy got back to me and said, yes, I'm happy to speak to your friend, just with one caveat, is that whoever takes this position, we want them to be in country. And if that's not going to be a parameter that your friend can meet, then I don't want to have a connection. But, I brokered the introduction. The guy sent me his offline email address and said, have your friend contact me. So, you make a great point that you don't know where people are in their lives, right? And, there's a friend of mine who's usually been very generous with her time, but, over the last 6 months of, what she's been working on, I don't know if it's family related or pandemic related, but she's just like, I only have a limited amount of time that I can spend. Yeah. And, you can't judge somebody's time. That's their own currency. So I think you bring up a great point that, just ask both sides. You really shouldn't assume anything. And then, because if you do assume, at some point somebody might say no, and then you don't look so great because you've offered to make the introduction. Right. Whereas, you've got to give yourself that caveat. You would say, I think that he would absolutely want to speak with you, but let me just check with him before I make that introduction. So that's great advice.
And an easy way to do that is, to be super data privacy friendly as well, and just say, I want to get permission before I share contact details. For those of us who come from countries with stricter data privacy laws, that's a sensible and reliable route you can go with. All right. Jay, for Hanukkah of 2020, you put the book, Sending the Elevator Back Down, What We've Learned from Great Women in Compliance, on your list, and your mum gifted you a copy. As you know, I'm a big fan of your mum. For those of you listening, I've also met Jay's mum on a number of occasions. And I've had the privilege of spending time with her. And I didn't think I could adore her more. And then she got you our book. So what a legend. What's a lesson in ethics that you've learned from your mum that you still practice to this day?
So this goes back to 1975. When the Boston Red Sox were playing the Cincinnati Reds for the World Series. And for some reason, my father was going to take me to the baseball game. It was game one of the World Series, which is, a pretty important thing. But for some reason, he decided that since it was back to school, he should be working, selling shoes to put food in his family's mouth. So he always regretted not going to this game. So my mom took me to the ball game, and we were way the heck out in the right field bleachers. And when they started to announce the Cincinnati Reds, I started booing. And my mother said, it is not very nice to boo the other team. And I was 10 years old and I thought, well, what the heck is she talking about? But over the intervening decades, I've kind of taken that information to heart. And one of the interesting networking things that we always do at an SCCE conference is they usually have an opening night tailgate event. And people wear sports shirts from their teams, whether baseball or football or hockey or their university. And I can't tell you how many pictures I take with New York Yankee fans when I am wearing my Red Sox uniform, or how many people, how many Indianapolis Colts fans I'll see when I'm wearing my Patriots jersey, of course, prior to this past season. But what I chose to take from my mother's lesson is that somebody may ideologically have a different point of view, or they might support a different team, but there is a certain type of respect that's built up between Red Sox and Yankees fans. And you can yell at each other and tell them that they stink and their team isn't any good. But at the end of the day, there's lots of pictures of me hugging somebody from the other team, that ends up on the website. So I think that lesson not only is important when you're networking at conferences, but it's also very important for everyone living in America today. That if somebody's rooting for the wrong team, it doesn't mean that they're bad, and it doesn't mean that they're out to get you. They have a different perspective, and there's a reason why they're rooting for that team. So you have to respect them for the team they root for. And if there's any, change that you can make, or if you can have an intelligent discussion about maybe why they should have a different point of view, that's something you can do. But I think that's a very timely thought to kind of wrap up our call. We're speaking today. It's Inauguration Day in the United States. And there are a lot of folks who have different ideas than us and then support a different team. But I think now's the time for us to have a dialogue and believe that we all have a reason to have a different point of view. But ultimately, we need to help each other, because if we don't help each other, we're not going to be able to be around.
Wise words, Jay. And to continue the theme, to wrap up from my side, I wanted to share some confidence-boosting reframing, a really different way of looking at things from my mum. When my brother and I were really little, we both loved Scooby-Doo very much, the cartoon. And as a teenager, I recounted my embarrassment to my mother that there were only ever really two villains to choose from in each episode. And I would always guess wrong. And I said, Mum, isn't that ridiculous statistically as well? I feel so stupid. And she said to me, you didn't get it wrong. You just went in a different direction to what the writers chose. You didn't get it wrong. So with that, we end our episode with Jay Rosen. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day ahead.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.